This linen suit is supposed to be cool, but it's not. Before Bill and Melinda Gates, there was Ted Turner. Over a 10-year period beginning in 1998, Ted Turner donated a cool $1 billion to the United Nations for causes such as saving children and clearing landmines. At the time of his pledge, the $1 billion amounted to about 1/3 of Turner's net worth. When he announced the news, he said, January 1, I was worth $2.2 billion. August 31, I was worth $3.2 billion. So all I'm giving away with this billion is 9 months' earnings. It's not even a full year's worth. Who cares? The next day he added, there is no greater joy on earth than giving money away. Although more recently he has admitted to having trouble signing that first check because he said his hand was shaking so bad. What you may not have heard is the background of the story. At age 24, Turner inherited his father's billboard advertising business and its debt, which had in part led to his father's suicide. All his life, Turner had worked under the shadow of that father, a tough, demanding man, a disciplinarian who charged his son rent when he was living at home and at times beat him severely. A couple of years ago, Turner made a telling remark about the meaning of money to him. He said that it was just another way of keeping score with his father. My father wanted me to be a big success, he said, and I've been a big success. If I hadn't been a big success, he would kick me around eternity, and I would never get any rest. Whatever the generous gesture of giving $1 billion away to help others tells us about Ted Turner's motivation, or the state of his soul, I cannot really know. But today I'm more interested in what it might mean to you and I. You see, Turner's experience with his father symbolizes eloquently that the relationship we have with serving or giving to others is inextricably linked to our relationship with the one that we call Father. That was a lot, wasn't it? Let me say it this way. How we treat others is often determined by our relationship with God the Father. Do we primarily give to and serve others because we believe that God has stuck us with such a huge debt that we need to pay on it forever and try to climb out of the hole? Or do we do so because we feel that God has blessed us with more than enough grace to spare? Are we convinced, like Ted Turner was, that we can never satisfy this demanding Father? Or is resting in God's grace and love our impetus to reach out to our brothers and sisters? Did you ever notice how many biblical stories are framed around the premise of a certain man who had 2 sons? Adam's sons, Cain and Abel. Abraham's sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac's sons, Esau and Jacob. The waiting father's elder son and the younger son called the prodigal. In these days, we would probably tell similar stories of 2 daughters or a daughter and a son. Sometimes the parent in question would likely be a mother. But even though the ones written down in the Bible are primarily about males, I hope that we all can see ourselves in them a bit. Beyond the particular family sagas, the thrust of the entire biblical drama can be viewed as the destinies of siblings intertwined, until the very end when together we encircle the Father in the Lamb, Jesus Christ. The task before us at this time and throughout time is how can we be siblings together? That is the basic question that stirs in my soul when I search the Bible for the will and the way of God. Or even at times when I open my Twitter feed. It confronts me because I know in my heart how easy it is to want to put myself and my interests first. In preparation for last week's sermon on the siblings Jacob and Esau, I came across a small text. And although time did not allow for me to include it in that message, it would not let me go. And I know why now. This week, as news began to filter in from the mass shooting in Charleston, I felt compelled to speak on this small text today. One small verse found in 1 John. 1 John 4:20. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister, whom they have seen, cannot love God, whom they have not seen. I want to read this again from the contemporary English version. But if we say that we love God and don't love each other, we are liars. We cannot see God, so how can we love God if we don't love the people we can see? Did you catch the difference? The first verse says, if you hate. But the second verse says, if you don't love. Those are different metrics. The absence of love is not always hate. Sometimes it can be fear, apathy, or indifference. Most, if not all of us, can go away from this place today justified that we don't hate anyone. We have not been malicious, we have not been violent. But when we look through the lens of, there are those that I have chosen not to fully love, the picture becomes a bit distorted. And then we read, how can we love God if we don't love the people we can see? With these words, John seems to suggest that it is, in fact, easier to love an observable human being, someone right before us, than it is to love an invisible God. He questions that if we cannot deliver on this easier task of loving each other, how will we ever have any success with the harder task? But if we say we love God and don't love each other, we are liars. Last year, it's been almost a year. Last year when we began this fellowship, I preached on a similar text from Matthew 22, beginning in verse 37. We have that next text here. It reads this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Austin Channing reminded me this week of some of the things that these verses do not say. She says that they do not say, just tolerate one another. They do not say, just be nice to each other. They do not say, just go volunteer. Take that mission trip. They do not say, just don't be rude. Just give them some money. Just attend a multicultural church. Just make sure you have one friend from another tribe, another race. No. The texts say to love. God commands it. And he commands his followers to do it. Love toward God and love toward our sisters and brothers. You know that this fellowship was intentionally created to be different. Not just in atmosphere, not in the syncopated music, but in the way we treat each other. This is what we value most here. As Christians, we strive to understand and love God through reading the scriptures, praying, going to church. We put forth an effort to get to know him, and these are good things, very important things. But sometimes we claim to love God without understanding what that fully means. And part of what it means is that we have to love each other, brothers and sisters. And if I'm not being clear, I'm not just talking about our immediate families, but brothers and sisters in the sense of all God's children. As we strive to love God, to understand the immensity of that, we can't be satisfied with only loving our significant others or our best friends. We can't be satisfied just loving the people that are like us, that share our faith, our race, our nationality. Everyone on this earth is a neighbor, and every Christian is a spiritual brother or sister. That's an immense concept, but it's an important one. Because the text says, how can we understand and love God without attempting to learn to love as he does? And again, he loves every single person on earth. Even the ones we hate, or fear, or dismiss, those that annoy us in traffic, the ones who cheat us, break laws, the ones that steal our jobs, the ones who are on other sides of war. God loves them. That person at work, that one relative, he loves them too. The people that we're scared of, maybe we're afraid that they would bring crime upon us. The people that we're scared might corrupt our children. Politicians, lazy preachers, dishonest sales reps. He loves them all. Yes, you say. Sure he does. But siblinghood is not easy. And I agree, it doesn't come naturally. Kate Benfield says that she remembers how the birth of her brother, born 11 months after her, drastically and forever altered her life. Speaking of her brother, she says, "I love him very much and cannot imagine life without him somewhere in the world. Looking into his face is like looking into my own, into the history we have shared, with all its hopes and dreams that did not come true or that did, even more than we could have imagined. I see it all when I look into his face. But when we were very young, there were times when I probably would have sent him back from where he came. Anything to regain my rightful place at the center of the universe." She continues, "In the end, growing up meant finding out that there was enough of everything to go around, that we are far richer together than alone, and that our differences only enrich the relationship." Siblings. On a broader scale, the reports from Charleston also serve to starkly remind us that siblinghood is not easy. This week, we collectively bore witness to a raw and evil manifestation of the sins of murder and racism. I heard some say that this domestic terrorist actions prove that there is a war on religion. No. Actually, it's proof of a war on black people. A war that has been waged by white religious people for many years. A 41-year-old pastor with 2 kids. Just like me, 41, 2 kids. Except that the color of his skin is a little darker than mine. He welcomed a man into his church, and for that gesture, he was killed along with 8 other individuals. 3 of which attended a Lutheran seminary. The man who perpetrated this crime claimed to be a Lutheran. Their church was desecrated. The people of the congregation were desecrated. And the aspiration voiced in our Declaration of Independence that we are all equal was desecrated. Some would say that this was an isolated act by a deeply disturbed man. Certainly he was disturbed. But we know that this is not the whole truth. It is not an isolated event. And even if the shooter was unstable, the framework upon which he built his vision of race is not. Violence and racism are facts in American culture. Denial and avoidance of this is deadly. You probably recognize the optical illusion that was behind me. We could have that back. It is sometimes used by psychologists to initiate conversations about how things are with us. Depending how you look at the image, you either see a fancy cup or 2 faces facing each other. No matter how long I look, I can only see one of the images. I cannot see both at the same time. A friend of mine once showed this image to a child at the hospital and asked, "What do you see?" And the child responded, "I see 2 faces kissing a cup." How I wish that I could see both images at once. Both pieces of that image together portray the goal of God to shape us into a cup to hold His grace, formed in the melting pot of face-to-face relationships, both human and divine, to receive and pour out blessings that we could never do alone. As we grow in God's Word, our destiny is not God and me alone floating on a cloud somewhere. The story culminates with all creation encircling the throne of God, face to face with God as we stand side by side with our sister and brothers. Siblinghood is at the heart of our relationship with God. Yet how often we would have it otherwise. It's just human nature, we might say. We looked at Jacob last week. Jacob, from before his birth, wrestling with his elder brother Esau, even emerging from the womb, grasping his heel, later wresting his birthright that belonged to Esau, in that quest to be first and only. We are Jacob, every one of us, whether we like to admit it or not, alternately attacking or running from, stealing from, and fearing those who are sinners. Sometimes go back and read those chapters in Genesis about Jacob and note how frequently the word face is repeated. For now, I'll mention just two. After seeing the face of God as he wrestled that night, Jacob is reconciled with his elder brother Esau, from whom he had been fleeing all his adult life. And he says this to Esau: "To see your face is like seeing the face of God." Finally seeing God's face when he wrestled with him, freed Jacob at last to see his brothers as one like himself. One Sabbath afternoon, many, many years ago, my dearly departed and saintly mother got into an argument with her sister, my aunt. Such a freakish was out of character for my mom, and I don't remember exactly what the argument was about. Probably some adult matter, and I was just a kid. But I do remember this: as things got heated, my grandfather stepped in and said to both of them, "If you don't stop this, you are in jeopardy of losing your souls." Slow your roll, Grandma. I remember thinking at the time, 10, 11 years old, I remember thinking, Grandpa, that's a little over the top. But now I'm not so sure. Perhaps Grandpa knew that you can't stand face to face with God if you can't stand face to face with your sister. How can we love God who we can't see if we don't love the people that we can see? We all have an elder brother named Jesus, whose face is the face of God and ours as well. He is the one who's come into the world to mend the shattered cup of creation, to heal all our separations. When we turn our faces toward him and discover who we truly are, we are free to look at others not as rivals, not as irrelevant, but as sisters and brothers, without whom we are never going to reach the goals that God has set before us. Look around you for a moment. Literally, look around for a moment. Look at each other's faces. Between us is a cup of salvation into which God has poured blessing upon blessing, grace sufficient for you and yours and more. Abundance to share with others so that they might see who God is, the Father who loves us all. Now, we might not be blessed with an extra $1 billion to pour out, but each of us has some special gift from God to give to make the world a better place. Amen. Can you imagine if we gave 1/3 of all our God-given worth, not just our money, but all the riches with which God has blessed us, or even 1/10? When we hold on and when we hoard, we are refusing to pour ourselves out for the sake of our siblings. When we do that, it's a sign that things are not going well between us and the Father. But we have seen the face of Jesus, and in him we know that there is no greater joy than giving ourselves away. According to Jesus, says Ted Turner, money is worthless. It won't buy you anything in heaven if there is one. It might not even get you in. Now, you and I don't have a clue what Jesus means to Ted Turner. But we do know that he means the world to us. We know that the Word tells us about the human journey and its goal, and how to set our sights as well as our hearts on that destiny. We know, intellectually and in our hearts, that God is forming us into a sacred cup to receive and pour out blessings. You might think that sounds good. Looks good here on the page. Sounds good, Jack. But what do we do with Charleston, with Ferguson, with my city, Baltimore? What do we do? I'd like to humbly suggest just a few small steps to go forward. First, I think we need to mourn together, remembering and honoring our Christian sisters and brothers whose lives were martyred. Then, as it is appropriate, we need to repent. Each of us needs to examine ourselves, our church, and our circles of influence. We need to be honest about the reality of violence and racism within us and around us. We need to talk, and we especially need to listen. And then we need to act. No stereotype, threat, or racial slur is justified, and we should let none go unchallenged. Let us speak out against injustice, and let us examine the many subtle and overt ways that we in our communities see people of color as being of less worth. Above all, let us pray for insight, for forgiveness, and for courage. And if your skin tone is a little closer to mine than it is to Dr. Phil's, I'd like to speak to you for just a moment. What might we say to our brothers and sisters in our midst today who are deeply hurt, whose lived experience is deeper and different than ours? May I suggest we start by saying two things recommended by Osheta Moore. Here they are. You ready? I'm sorry, and I'm listening. I'm sorry because we are called to be peacemakers. We're called to be the ones to cry out immeasurable worth when image bearers are devalued. We're the voices of justice. We're the ones who draw the line in the sand and level the playing field. I'm sorry can tame the anger. It respects the pain, and it positions us as friends, not adversaries. And I'm listening. I'm listening because we're called to be agents of reconciliation. Like Jesus reconciled us to the Father, it's a painful process, a denying process, a humiliating process, but it is a kingdom process. I'm listening says, yes, I have an opinion, and yes, I have feelings too. And yes, this makes me feel more than a little helpless, but I'm going to press into this pain and listen. I'm listening is all you need to say right now. I'm listening disrupts the enemy's plan to pit pride against pain. I'm sure he's delighted with every defensive stance, every zinger post on social media that perpetuates us versus them. Right now, there are many, even some among us here today, who need to hear the words, I'm sorry, and I'm listening. Will you let your words be few and your love great today as we process this cowardly crime in Charleston? Will you practice peace by putting aside your agenda and taking up the call of the cross to die to yourself? Will you hold ground for healing where violence tramples hope? It's a choice, and the choice is yours. These are critical hours and defining hours. Together, let us push back the darkness, one peacemaking response at a time, with compassionate hearts and listening ears. All of us have eternity. And these living ears to show God the Father that we believe in His love for us by loving our sisters and brothers here and now, pouring ourselves out and giving ourselves away. Ted Turner is a rich person here in the Southeast. There is a book written by a rich person on the West Coast with a title that summarizes how we might go forward. Starbucks chair and CEO Howard Schultz wrote a book entitled Pour Your Heart Into It. How Starbucks built a company one cup at a time. You are rich people. Pour your hearts into it. And step by step, a bit at a time, sin will be confronted. The Church of Jesus Christ will be built. And God will be glorified. Amen.